Good afternoon. Happy Friday. It is September 22nd, and you are here today attending the webinar titled, and I'm going to read this, and it's probably the only thing I'll read verbatim this entire webinar, How to Manage Cyber Risk as a Tech Startup, or any startup for that matter. What startup nowadays isn't tech in my mind? There's a tech component all over the place in terms of how you have to run your business. My name is Logan Edmonds. I am the CEO of Tabernacle Technology Solutions. We are a cybersecurity and cyber risk advisor, as well as an IT provider for companies that are just starting up at Series A, Series B, or doing an IPO. We've done it all. We have worked with startups from beginning of seed stage all the way to IPO, as I mentioned before. And we specialize in sort of navigating this crazy new field of cyber risk that's just been exploding. Spoilers, and I hope it's really not spoilers, but have you guys heard about the MGM ransomware incident last couple weeks? It's only been everywhere. MGM Casino is one of the biggest casinos in the country out in Vegas. I was just in Vegas last month for DEF CON. I literally walked right by them on the strip. They were down, like hard down for over 10 days. And the contributing thing that caused that, like the incident, the root cause, a 10-minute phone call with an employee. A hacker picked up the phone, called an employee, and through that phone call got that employee's user access. The amount of money MGM lost can be measured in the millions per hour. Or not per hour, per day. Sorry, in the millions per day. It's insane looking at everything. Cyber incidents have, in the digital world, directly affect the real world. The line is more blurrier than ever, and where cyber ends and real begins, and vice versa. So, what are we supposed to do about that, right? Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. First off and foremost, when I get this out of the way, if at any point you feel like, man, I need a dedicated conversation, not a webinar, with someone who knows something about this, we got you covered. In the top left-hand corner, we have a QR code. If you go to the QR code, you go straight to our cyber strategy session booking page. What is that? It is a complimentary thing we are giving to any attendee of this webinar, a 15-minute, absolutely free, no strings attached, dedicated call with one of our cybersecurity professionals, cyber risk advisors. You can go ahead and scan that QR code, pick a time slot that works best for you on your calendar, sends a calendar link to both parties, and you're off to the races. This is going to stay up there for the entirety of this call. We'll also have it available on the big end slide when we get to the very end of the webinar. Okay, cyber risk. Let's go ahead and share today's main topic. We have a slide deck. I'm actually going to do it this way. I think it's a little better. How to manage cyber risk as a tech startup. How do I do that? Well, let's talk about that. So first and foremost, technology and innovation are revolutionizing the way businesses operate. They're offering unprecedented opportunities for growth, for quickly scaling, and for efficiency. It's awesome. It is an awesome time from a technology standpoint and an operational standpoint to start a startup, to go from little to big in record time. But like with most opportunities, this is going to bring inherent risks that we have to manage. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look here a second. What is cyber risk? What is the risk I'm referring to? Well, cybersecurity risk refers to the potential for unauthorized access, use, disclosure, disruption, modification, or destruction of information in a business. It can also entail financial losses, damage to an organization's reputation, legal repercussions, and is influenced by a firm or business's use of technology, the nature of its business operations, and the strategies in place to safeguard against a range of vulnerabilities and threats. That's the technical definition, if you'd want to hear that. Does ignoring any kind of risk, let alone cyber risk, make it go away? That's the inherent question we've been asking ourselves for the last few years. My answer to that question is a resounding no. It does not go away just by ignoring it. However, that's a question and an answer that we all have to ask and answer ourselves. So at the end of this webinar, my hope is you're going to be able to answer that question for yourself as it pertains to you and any kind of startup you're affiliated with. Quote from sifted.eu: data breaches are usually associated. Sorry about that, folks. We lost connection for a split second. Data breaches are usually associated with big names, huge scandals, and hefty fines. Think Facebook or Google. But startups, too, are regular targets of malicious online activity. In 2020, hackers leaked 1 million customer emails from French crypto start crypt sorry, that's a word mouthful. Crypto French crypto starter Ledger, and is now facing legal action from dozens of those affected. You can see here I have slides showing that Cerebral, a mental health startup, lost the data of more than 3 million people, and they have to go public with this. For spoilers for this presentation, every state in the United States has data breach disclosure laws. Every single one on a state level. This isn't a federal level. This isn't a mandate in a specific industry. This is just a blanket. If you are breached, you have to disclose. If you are breached, with asterisk, not a lawyer, have legal counsel actually tell you about this. But if you are breached, you have to disclose. We lost the presentation for some reason. Let me put this back up. You got to tell people that you breached. Nobody wants to do that. Let's be honest here. Nobody in this world running a business wants to do that. But there are real legal and financial ramifications of not doing so. So the majority of companies that get breached end up having to go public about it. Let's continue. This article, I'm not done quoting this article. Hackers aren't just after sensitive data. Cyber attacks can take different forms, ranging from ransomware, when a company's information or systems are held hostage in exchange for a monetary sum, to cybercrime, tricking someone into sending money to the wrong person. I have dealt with a situation where someone in a position of authority in the financial department was tricked into wiring a $115,000 lump sum offshores. I've been involved in it. I've seen it happen with my own eyes. And the funny thing about that, the culminating thing, the big technical aspect was the only thing technically that happened to them was their email was hacked. Someone hacked their email, read through all their email, and put together a scam using the context from their email that they would believe. They impersonated a contractor that the firm was actively working with. These attacks are targeting organizations of all sizes, but it is a risk often underestimated by startups who just don't see themselves as a prime target for hackers. Especially in the early days from zero to when there are 30, 40, 50 people on board, there isn't much focus on cybersecurity, says E. Kenneth Pentamonti, principal at Cyber Focus VC, Paladin Capital Group. Cybersecurity company Dynarisk recently analyzed the cyber risk profile of portfolio companies for 75 leading VC funds in London, assessing the criteria ranging from leaked usernames and password combinations to reoccurrence of company names and hacker groups on the dark web. It found that 65%, more than 1 in 2, of portfolio companies showed a high risk of suffering a cyber attack. 65%. 65%. I'm going to take a pause here for a second and ask on our various social media threads. I have the comments up from our main webinar, from our YouTube channel, from our Facebook and our LinkedIn. Do you have any insight? Do you have any feedback to that stat? 65%. What's your initial reaction to that? We're going to take 30 seconds here and allow the comments to post. Okay, we're going to keep cruising on. If you do have any feedback or questions at any point, please post them in the comments of any forum you're currently watching. We are currently streaming live on our website, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So we're watching all those avenues. Okay, so we just got done with finding out that 65% of, according to this survey, the cybersecurity company DynaRisk, of startups and a portfolio company from a VC funds in London, or from multiple VC funds in London, are susceptible to a high risk of suffering a cyber attack. 65%. Let's keep going. Let's give you specific examples. Okay, cyber security risks inside of a startup. What does that look like, practically speaking, right? Like cybersecurity is this big topic. Let's get tactical for a second. Let's talk about phishing attacks. That's when someone tricks you into sharing sensitive information, like a password, by pretending to be someone else you trust. Phishing is huge, and because it's successful, nearly 20% of phishing emails are opened and clicked. 20%, 1 in 5. The honest truth is humans over time, while an individual person, no matter how smart they are, can detect it, 95% of the time, everybody has a bad day. Everybody makes mistake. Yeah. YubiKeys are awesome, Tim. I just saw Tim's comment right here. YubiKeys are fantastic. FIDO2 WebAuthn and what's commonly referred to as passkeys. Those things are going to change the world here because MGM, if they had passkeys, there's a decent shot, and obviously we don't know all the details yet, that breach probably wouldn't have happened. Personally, from us, we recommend no matter which direction you go to implement a phishing-resistant form of authentication. Because phishing attacks are prevalent. Hey, that ties in great. Thanks, Tim. Phishing attacks are prevalent with all kinds of with these attackers. Ransomware is another great example of risk. I'm pretty sure everyone who's attending this webinar has at least heard the term ransomware. It's a type of malware that locks your data, whether in the cloud or on your computer. That's a big one a lot of people aren't aware of. Ransomware does affect cloud data. You can be ransomware even if you're in the cloud. A lot of people didn't know that. It locks your data until you pay a ransom. That's what's happened to MGM, and as we found out as well, Caesars, that happened to them as well. Thanks, Tim. Caesars, it happened to. Caesars paid Caesars is another casino for those of you who aren't up to lingo in the Las Vegas Strip. Caesars is another casino that got hit, and according to reports, Caesars paid over $15 million just to have these ransomware actors give them back their stuff. $15 million for one attack. That's a huge payday for these criminals. And of course, outdated software. That's a big one. A lot of you, this is a little bit of older news, but this year we were dealing with something called the MOVEit breach. What is the MOVEit breach? Well, there was a very popular application used to move files from one source to the other called MOVEit. And what happened was a critical vulnerability, a bug basically in the software that someone messed up or someone didn't catch, was exploited by a ransomware group called Clop, which, this is a tangent. These ransomware criminals have the silliest of names sometimes. I get a real kick if it weren't such a sinister thing. But yeah, one of the most dangerous groups this year to come out was one that goes by the name Clop. And Clop was exploiting this software, this outdated software, to ransom big companies. The government in Nova Scotia got impacted, the Department of Energy. We saw big insurance firms. We saw energy companies. We saw Fortune 500 companies get hit by this. It was just because everyone was using this software, and this software had a hole in it, and the patch didn't come quick enough and all the time. So running outdated software can actually lead to real financial losses by criminals exploiting it. These are all examples of real cyber risks you're going to come across as being a startup. If you have an email account, if you use any kind of technology, you're going to face this stuff. And the risks are rising. That's a big one here. They're not diminishing. So the FBI IC3 serves as, and I'm going to actually blow this up a little bit so you guys can see it a little better. The FBI IC3 serves as a public resource for organizations to submit reports of cyber attacks and incidents. It's one of the main data points we use to reference year by year what's going on, right? And what we're seeing is business email compromise, where someone just takes over your email and uses that for financial exploitation, whether to trick you or your customers. That's another one. They'll take over your email and email fraudulently to your customers using your identity to send money. Is a significant threat. In 2022, it received 21,832 complaints, totaling more than 2.7 billion. $2.7 billion in adjusted losses. BEC methods are not the Nigerian prince. I put in there that they've evolved and become more sophisticated. Most people think of a phishing email when I'm talking about is like, oh, I'm the Nigerian prince, send me money. They're not like that anymore. They are slick, they are sophisticated, and they are targeted. We'll get to that in a second. They are targeted. Ransomware is another threat that can't be ignored. The IC3 in 2022 received over 2,385 ransomware complaints. And last but not least, and it's kind of crazy because this one's a tried and true method that we all know about, but call center fraud victims. Call center fraud victims were up as well. Hold on, sorry guys. There we go. There are two types of call centers that frauds that were done to businesses primarily. Either call centers, the call center scam that was impersonating tech support. I mean, I actually heard an incident. I didn't hear it. I was reported to, and there's nothing I could do. This is not relevant to businesses, but to give you an example that's near and dear to my heart because I was a part of, I had a call from someone who was tricked by someone. She clicked on a website that she goes to all the time. She got a message saying Microsoft support needed to talk to her. Disclosure: Microsoft support almost never calls anybody. You call them, but she believed it was Microsoft support, and she called them. And over the course of 3 weeks, this support group, which spoilers was a bunch of criminals, managed to scam her out of her entire 401k savings. That's called a pig butchering. Is the current terminology that's being used right now. She lost her entire 401k. This was a lady in her I believe her early to mid 50s. So retirement, 401k, that mattered to her quite a bit, more than a lot of other people even. So that stuff does happen, is going on in the wild, and we're seeing on the business, professional, and legal services in Q1 of 2023 a 89% increased rise in reports. 89% rise in Q1 of this year alone. The stats are really depressing. I'm going to go back to the split view. Now, this story, I'm going to go ahead. I am a big believer in storytelling. I love hearing stories. I love reading stories. I think storytelling is one of the greatest presentation formats ever invented by humanity for communicating a message, a story, a moral, whatever, or not story, a moral, an objectivity, data, whatever you might have you. I have sanitized this story and adjusted details. This is a story that happened to an actual someone we worked with. And I've adjusted it and I've renamed it and I made it a little quirky to protect the identities of those involved. So here the story is we talk about another cybersecurity incident that my firm has dealt with. Once upon a time in the bustling city of Techville lived a diligent employee named Sarah. Sarah worked for a small, reputable financial firm and was known for her meticulous attention to detail. One day, while sipping her morning coffee and going through her emails, she received a message that appeared to be from her boss, Mr. Thompson. The email was perfectly crafted. It mirrored Mr. Thompson's usual tone, his writing style, and it read, "Sarah, I need you to review this financial report urgently. There seems to be a discrepancy in our accounts. Please check the attached document and get back to me ASAP." The email had an attachment named financial_report.pdf. Sarah, being the diligent employee she was, immediately clicked on the attachment, eager to resolve the issue. However, unbeknownst to her, she had just fallen victim to a sophisticated spear phishing attack. And I'm going to talk about what spear phishing is in a second. Spear phishing attack powered by generative AI. You can't have a webinar in 2023 without AI making an appearance, right? To continue the story, the email, of course, as you probably already figured out, was not from Mr. Thompson, but from a cyber criminal who used generative AI to mimic Mr. Thompson's writing style. The AI had been trained on numerous emails and documents to create a convincing forgery. The attachment was not a financial report, but a malicious software that now had access to Sarah's computer. Spear phishing, for those of you who don't know, I promise I talk about it, is a targeted attack, meaning that somebody has looked up your LinkedIn profile, who your supervisor is, where you went to high school. They've probably gone on your website. They have done their research on who they are targeting and have crafted their scam, their tactic, their social engineering, whatever, their phishing email most of the time, to be more realistic, something you would expect, not the Nigerian prince. Spear phishing has a horrendous success rate. It's one of the most difficult things to protect against. In this specific instance, it worked. The hacker had access to Sarah's computer, uninterrupted, permanent access. He could view her screen. He could take her passwords. He could see all the cloud platforms she was using to do her job, Microsoft 365, QuickBooks, you named it. He was in there and he had it. He could take money from their bank accounts if she logged into the bank account. The list goes on and on and on. These are what the cyber criminals are after. Whether you are bootstrapped, pre-seed, or preparing an IPO, hear me when I say this. You are a target for cyber criminals. I don't take joy in saying that, but you are a target for cyber criminals as a startup. There is someone, and there are literally countries. Russia. We pick on Russia a lot, allegedly. Allegedly, Russia does not prosecute cyber criminals for the most part, as long as they don't target Russian interests. So there are literally sky rises full of these people, allegedly, sitting in there, targeting businesses and opportunities in countries with no extradition treaty. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Here is the security challenge that someone like me as a cybersecurity professional has to face when dealing with this. And I know I'm not the only one on this call. So for those of you who are cybersecurity professionals, my hat's off to you. It's both a great and super challenging time to be in the career field. Half of the companies that were lost 11 to 20% of their client base, after a ransomware breach. And by the way, these statistics were compiled from the National Cybersecurity Alliance and the SC magazine. So 92.4% of attacks are delivered via email, which a lot of people raise their eyebrows and say, really, email? Well, yeah. Every business under the sun nowadays has an email, and the criminals know that. It is a unifying thing that we all have, so it makes sense from an efficiency standpoint to target email. Let's continue going on. On average, it takes and this number fluxes a lot, but when we ran these stats, about 120 days to discover a data breach. 120 days. That's 4 months after a criminal makes a move before anybody realizes that anybody's been in there. 58% of malware attack victims are small businesses. And this last one's hidden by my face, so I'm going to go ahead and minimize myself. 60% of small and medium-sized businesses go under within 6 months of a breach. Long-term speaking, let's talk realistically about risk. That's the whole point of this thing, right? I'm not going to tell you that you can't recover from a cyber breach. You absolutely can. And statistically speaking, if you can survive the first 6 months of all the implications, you can recover from that one incident. The problem is, do you have the cash reserves, and do you have the customer base and the trust to survive those initial 6 months? Because you have to, a lot of times, disclose to government bodies. You have to pay payments for like credit monitoring. Of course, insurance gets involved. You've got to go ahead and deal with the reputational fallout, like we talked about. If it's a ransomware incident, 20% of your customer base, that is not insignificant to cash flow. The list goes on and on and on. Those 6 months following a breach are brutal and emotionally traumatizing. I've never met anybody who's gone through a data breach or a cyber attack and said, well, that was fun, let's do it again, right? It's always, what can I do to never have to go through this ever again? That is always the response I hear after a cyber attack, a real cyber attack. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to stop here, though, and go ahead and ask for questions. Does anybody have any questions? I see we have a few people on LinkedIn. Welcome. We also have a couple on YouTube and through our online stream platform. Let me go ahead and take 30 seconds here. I'm going to pause because I know I'm 10 seconds ahead of you guys. Shut up. Post some questions in the comments. If you have any feedback of what you've heard so far, or if you want some more explanation, or for me to elaborate on anything. 30 seconds, guys. Thank you. Maybe I should have said 60 seconds. We're going to keep on trucking. Thank you, everyone. If you still have questions, please keep posting them. I will answer them as we go through this. Or if you just have comments or feedback, this is a topic that's going to require a whole community to rally around. And I just want to contribute to the conversation. Okay. Let me pull my slide deck back up. There we go. How do you respond to these cyber threats? Okay, you've heard the why, how, what's going on. What are you supposed to do about it? That's the reason you're here, right? Well, first, I guess the big takeaway you have to understand when you make a plan is these cyber criminals treat it like a job. There are nation states out there, don't get me wrong, that's a whole other topic. But the majority of cyber attacks, based on all available data, are done and performed by opportunistic criminals. They view it as a job, especially when they don't have to see the face of their victims. They work 9 to 5. As I alluded to earlier, there are literally high rises and office buildings full of these people. One of the things I like to say is the commonly understood symbol of a hacker in this day and age usually is a guy in a hoodie with a glowing keyboard in a dark room. That is not generally what a cyber criminal looks like in my experience. I'm not saying there aren't any of them out there, but from my standpoint, from my perspective, a cyber criminal more looks like me, wearing a collared shirt, maybe sitting in some kind of cubicle, a whiteboard up with a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, etc. 9 to 5, working to make money. That's what a cyber criminal looks like. They treat it like a job, like a legitimate business avenue in a lot of cases. And you can read stories about that. I was reading one about a bigger ransomware gang that literally had employee of the month. Like this is how they view it. And this is how they treat it. And because of that, because of the ever powerful force of commoditization, and we'll talk about that in a second, the security landscape has changed dramatically over the past year. Just to give you an example, in that question I asked before, does ignoring your risk go away? If you're at the point where you're like where I'm at and you're saying no, ignoring my risk doesn't make it go away, well, is now the time to manage your risk? That's the second question you have to ask yourself. Health startup miners to shut down after data breach exposed health records. Revolt. I'm going to go ahead and blow this up a bit because it's a little small for me. Revolt data breach exposes information for more than 50,000 customers. Multiple data breaches suggest ed tech company Chegg didn't do its homework, alleged FTC. Just Google cyber attack startup. You can find endless articles about this. The risk is real, it's present, and it's transparent to everyone involved. Is it time to manage it? If it's time for you to manage your risk, here's what you need to start thinking about. In order to properly manage any kind of risk, cyber or otherwise, you need to get the data. You need to get the data to make the right decision for your business. If you don't have the right data points in front of you, you can't effectively manage risk. How do I get that data, you might ask? You identify your current risk exposure. You get a snapshot on how this risk directly pertains to you and your business with specific data points. Only then can you make a tailored risk mitigation strategy to deal with this risk. I recommend working with an outside consultant. Of course, we provide this as well, for a cybersecurity risk assessment. Risk assessments are a time and true method to evaluate risk. CPAs perform them, insurance advisors perform them, cybersecurity professionals should be performing them as well, and you want to look for the right partner to do this. It is a professional consulting engagement. It identifies and investigates your current security position, determines how susceptible your business is to any kind of attack, because your business is unique. You have a unique footprint, and it needs to be uniquely measured. It examines how likely your staff or employees are to enabling or furthering the attack, whether your team's 4 or 400. You need to kind of get a sense of how street savvy they are to this. It identifies physical or procedural weaknesses in a business or startup that enable attacks. Attackers generally rely on human error, procedural error, some kind of mistake. whether through an employee's actions or procedural actions to escalate privilege. MGM is a great example. It sounds like there was some kind of procedural error where someone can pick up a phone call for 10 minutes, talk to the right person, and get full access to basically shut down the casino. That sounds like there's going to be a procedural component that needs to be identified, addressed, and remediated going forward. And of course, identify the most likely at-risk business assets. What are you trying to protect? What is an attacker going to go for? Or what's going to hurt you the most if they get a hold of? Is it your data? Would ransomware, for example, like MGM, cause you harm? Is it your finances? How well are your financial controls? We do a lot of financial control work, and it's kind of crazy how cyber seems to be a lot of times this big gap. We're doing procedural work and making sure, embezzlement protections. If you're in the insurtech space, I mean, that stuff, those regulatory reserves are so heavily regulated against all kinds of stuff. Yeah, there's all this work, but can a financial administrator, for example, who has access to those accounts, be tricked into wiring, thinking that she's wiring money to a contractor or to a vendor? Those are the questions you got to ask yourself. What is your most likely at-risk business asset? I'm going to blow this up a little bit more. So my face in the corner. This is our process. I am sharing with you our intellectual property right now because I believe in it so strongly. This is how we do a cybersecurity risk assessment. First, we get to know the key points of contact for your business. Whether that's a C-level executive or someone who has taken direct ownership of this problem, we meet with them, we interview them, we talk about what are the priorities of your business. We get to know you as a startup and what your mission is, what your values are, what is your main goals. We are going to ask you about any existing security policies you already have. Maybe you are a more mature startup. You're already thinking about this proactively. You're thinking, hey, I need to have a WISP, for example, a written information security policy. We want to learn about that. If you have a physical environment, now obviously we work in a world where remote employment is a thing, so this one's can be optional depending on the kind of business you have. But if you have a physical environment, an office space, something where people are gathering and utilizing, is there any kind of physical vulnerabilities that could lead to a massive issue? I had an incident where there was a developer for a customer that called us, and they were working out of a local coffee shop, a pretty popular one, and they called me because someone had hacked the local coffee shop and used it to brute force their test development they're running on their laptop and try to take data. That stuff does happen. And in this case, it didn't happen. They didn't get past it, but still. Network review. You got to review the network. You got to review, and what I mean by network is not like a router, not necessarily, though that's part of the equation. A network is how you transmit, in my mind, from the modern version of a network. You are transmitting the key data that runs your business, whether that's a cloud, that includes cloud applications too. Google, Microsoft, they are part of the network purview and the network review because we're going to review the data that flows over that network and the transmission protocols. How are they communicating? Is it secure? A great example of this is your Google Drive. A lot of people think when they share Google Drive that it's only for the person they're sharing to, but if you click that folder and click share, and you don't specify the person it's going to, that is a permanent link on a website that has that data open to the internet. We're going to look for that stuff and make sure that if it is that way, we're locking it down. Intellectual property reviews, hey, your startup is special. You've got a secret sauce. We want to make sure that that's not being distributed willy-nilly in a way you're not aware of. Users and systems, we're going to look at that. We're going to look at, how kind of software they're running, what they're using for their daily business. Is it trustworthy? A great example of this, I had a startup that called me because they were trying to install a video player for a pitch vent. And it turns out that video player wasn't the real video player. It was a malicious version that a hacker put up, spoofed the website, and trying to get this startup to install on their computer that would have given them full access. I want to make sure that stuff's not already there. And this, of course, is all confidential. We're going to look at the dark web. The dark web is like an open forum for these criminals. It's basically almost untraceable. It looks like a 2008 version of MySpace in a lot of ways. It's not pretty, but it's an open internet. And these criminals, they have egos. More often than not, if they have done something in the past that impacts a company, they'll post it about it on the dark web openly if you know where to look. We know where to look. So we'll take a look at the dark web to see if there's any indicators of data, whether it's directly with your company, partners, vendors, etc., that could impact you. Last but not least, the team behavior test. The team behavior test means what it says. We are going to try to pretend to be criminals and see remotely most of the time if we can get your team to give us something they shouldn't give, whether that's through a phishing email, something other kind of what we call social engineering. We're going to see how they hold up with their street savviness. And not to shame. That is never the goal of this assessment. We are not here to shame. We are all equally under the gun for this problem. But we need to know if there's an educational gap that needs to be addressed. Maybe someone just needs a little bit of training to be a little more street savvy. That is always on the table. We provide the findings and recommendations directly to the executive sponsor. It is confidential. There is no going outside on this. It comes with a report, an executive briefing, and of course, a presentation that breaks this down into easy to understand language. This is not a technical jargon report. This is not a binder of pages that is this big. This is actionable intel that you can use to make a good business decision. We also provide a follow-up consultation on your execution of any of the recommendations or strategies you might develop during this presentation to help you manage your risk. We are here as a risk advisor for you. How do I get started? Well, if you're interested in learning more, and I'm going to open up in a second for any kind of questions or comments that you guys have about this. But if you're interested in learning more, I now have pulled up on my screen a QR code. It's been up in the top left-hand corner this whole time, but here's the other one. You can scan this QR code, take that free 15-minute cyber strategy session, learn more, and talk about what this process entails. I'm a firm believer that this is not a problem you can just buy a subscription for and it's taken care of. If that were the case, we would have fixed this problem already. Everybody would go out and buy Norton antivirus, which, spoilers, don't buy Norton antivirus. That's my personal recommendation. Just don't buy it. But we wouldn't have this problem, right? That's not how this problem works. We need to look at it holistically and see what tactics are applied best to your business. So go ahead, if you're interested in proceeding further, scan this QR code on my slide deck or in the top left-hand corner. You can go ahead and schedule a free, no strings attached, no commitment, 15 cyber strategy session with myself or one of our other qualified cybersecurity professionals, where we can take you through this journey in more detail, answer any questions you have, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to leave that there for a second. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up. Does anybody have any questions of people who are attending this webinar? Any feedback? What kind of stuff, when you hear about this, comes into your mind that you would love to have a clean, clear answer for? Or do you just want to talk about your experiences? We're open to that too. It's an open forum. I'm going to be quiet for the next 60 seconds. Go ahead and type in the comments. Open up. Okay. Well, hopefully that I'm going to go ahead and check the comments real quick, but I didn't see anything come in. Take action today. That's my biggest push. That's my call to action. Take action, take power back into your hands. You can do so through a cybersecurity risk assessment. Once you know what you need to do, it is so empowering to know how you can thwart these criminals from getting what they want, protect your business, protect your revenue, take control back, and not have to live in any kind of fear of uncertainty for this. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're all about. I want to be able to go to sleep at night knowing my risk is managed. And that's what I want for you too. Take control of yourself, take back control for your risk. If you have any questions, if you want to leave a review, you can also, of course, scan the QR code, but you can check out our website as well, tabernacle.tech. That's tabernacle.tech. We have a whole bunch of blog posts about various topics in this. Let me know if you guys are interested in learning more. Just as a special offer for anyone who, I'm going to do this a bit on a whim, for anybody who watches this webinar, for anybody who's currently a part of this, or is watching the replay, because we are probably going to host this as a replay, I'm going to go ahead and give a freebie. I'm giving you a freebie. This was not intended. This was not planned. This was not advertised. But I'm just going to go ahead and do it because I want to do stuff like that. So let me see here real quick. I'm going to go ahead and put this up. Maybe you're not ready to go for the full 15-minute session. Maybe you're still trying to evaluate your options. You know what? I respect that. Do your due diligence. That's what we're talking about today. I would be a hypocrite if I didn't tell you to do your due diligence. So I'm going to change the QR code up in the top left-hand corner. Hang on a second. All right, the limited man characters. I am posting a brand new QR code. Give it a second. This is a free miniature risk assessment. It's not as comprehensive as what we were talking about before, but it is free, no strings attached, and it is a do-it-yourself risk assessment, which I know you startup founders, I know you investors, you guys are smart cookies, and I am totally aware of that. So what I'm going to offer instead is a free guided do-it-yourself risk assessment just to get an initial temperature check of where you think you need to be, or what if there is any concern. You can do that free, no obligations, no commitments. It is a free, give me, I want to give it to you guys. To be honest with you, to do this for someone, I normally would charge about $500 to $1,000 for this kind of work. For just to come in for consultation, this is a free thing for you. So go ahead, take that. I'm giving it to you. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can find us on our website, my LinkedIn, Facebook. I mean, we're everywhere. Take back control today. Use the free risk assessment if you're not ready to do a scheduled appointment. I just want to see you guys taken care of. Thanks. Have a great day.